Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good evening, whatever the case may be. I'm Dr. Ilse Köhler-Rollesen, and I have the great pleasure, honor, and really joy to be able to introduce you, to welcome you all on behalf of the International Camel Organization and the King Abdulaziz Public Library in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, to the second International Symposium of the International Camel Organization, to an amazing program with author Christina Adams about her book, Camel Crazy, and her incredible journey around camel milk. Before I introduce everybody else, I would also like to introduce myself. So I'm a veterinary doctor from Germany, originally currently based in India. I've done research on camels for 40 years, starting out in Jordan, where I fell in love with camels for the first time, and then did my PhD on camel domestication and followed by fieldwork in Sudan. And then fate brought me to India, where I've been based ever since, working on a traditional camel nomadic community, the Raika. And just recently, I have started India's first dedicated camel dairy. Now I want to say a few words about the International Camel Organization. It was established on March 21st in 2019, and it has 96 member states. It was founded in Riyadh, and I'm very happy that I was there at the occasion, because I'm so pleased that there's an international organization now that recognizes the unique role of the camel breeding culture in the history and development of the nomadic civilization and humanity as a whole. And it has seen the necessity to preserve not just the camel, but the whole culture around it. And it's trying to consolidate the activities of different organizations, including government, political, and public figures. And it contributes to the development of special friendly relations between people and countries. And its mission is to contribute to the preservation of ethnocultural heritage and originality of peoples of the world through development of the camel breeding culture. It's an absolutely amazing organization, and we camel lovers are so glad to have it. But now to Christina Adams, who is not only the author of Camel Crazy, A Quest for Miracles in the Mysterious World of Camels, which won a Nautilus Book Award, but also of an earlier book called A Real Boy, A True Story of Autism, Early Intervention and Recovery, which was published by Penguin. Christina is a journalist, and her work has appeared in many well-known publications, including the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post. It's been on National Public Radio, in the Orange Coast magazine, and Open Democracy, Global Advances in Health and Medicine, the Rajasthan Patrika. So it's been featured all over the world, basically. She's also received a number of awards for her work, and she has an MFA in creative writing. She teaches, speaks internationally, and has the winner of the Dr. V. Kurian Award of Excellence in Dairy Farming Practices and Innovations. And she also has a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Sri Ram Singh Memorial Animal Welfare Award. She lives in California. And now over to you, Christina.
Dr. Ilse, there could not be a more gracious introduction nor a more wonderful host for today than yourself. Thank you very much. Dr. Ilse is also the author of a book called Camel Karma about her time in India, and it is a great read, so I totally recommend that. It's actually recommended reading in the back section of my book, Camel Crazy. So I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum, and I would want to welcome everybody today. Let's have a great time together. Let's learn some new things and enjoy each other's company. And shukran for attending today. You are very, very welcome. So this is the International Symposium on Camel Crazy and the amazing story of camel milk. Since today is World Autism Awareness Day 2021, it's a perfect day for such a discussion. So I'd like to thank the International Camel Organization, their founder and president, Sheikh Fahad bin Hafleen, Secretary General, Dr. Mubarak Al-Aswilam, and their outstanding staff for their efforts to support camels. This endeavor is really, really important. If there had been such a thing as an International Camel Organization when I started this, how many years ago now? Quite a few. Then it would have possibly made things easier for me, but anything easy isn't that worth doing, correct? So they have been really key to kind of bringing things together, as Dr. Ilse has said, and I'm sure we'll see more from this organization. And I'd also like to thank the King Abdulaziz Public Library and their general manager, Dr. Bandar Al-Mubarak, and staff, including Mohammed, our technician today. He's been great support for this program. And of course, Dr. Ilse Kolar-Rollison for her introduction and taking time to engage in this presentation today. May I also state that Saudi has been really a leader in camel research. They did one of the first publications in autism and camel milk, and it's just wonderful to see that their natural resource of camels is recognized by them. That's a great thing. One mother, one camel lives. Do you believe that one person can change the world? Do you think that strangers will help you? Do you think that there are still, oh, I need to.
Share the screen, please.
Oh, share the screen, yikes. Okay. Okay, here, share, yeah. Okay. Okay, our screen is visible, everyone?
Yes.
All right, okay. So here we go. We're off on to the screen sharing now, and we will proceed. So you've heard my everyone, and now let's go to our first slide of the presentation. So I hope you can see it. I'm sorry, what? Oh, we need the whole. Okay, the slides. Hold on. Okay, I don't have a good screen here. Swap displays, perfect. Okay.
Huh.
No, that's my, yeah, I don't want that one. Okay, I need the one without just the regular one. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. I'll be right back in a second. Hang on, everybody. Okay. Okay, I need to show the proper screen. I wasn't showing my full screen. So I did it. I swapped them. Now I'll swap them again. Okay. But see, they were saying it wasn't showing my whole screen. Where's my presentation that I should show? Right here? Oh, okay. Now I'm going to try this. Which one? This one, right? No, screen 2, there we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're back on screen 2, right? Do we have the full screen?
Yes, we do. Go ahead, Christina, fine.
Okay, thank you, audience, for sticking with us. We're involving many countries right now and many time zones, so I appreciate your patience. Okay, so let's take a look at this slide. I've titled it, One Mother, One Camel, Many Lives. And this is a slide that says a lot to me. It's me with 4 women from a village in India, and they are from a camel and sheep herding culture called the Raika. And it's just an example of how one person can really go out and help others and meet the world and make things happen. So let's find out about that today. As I said, there are a lot of things to be found out. If you come on this journey, we'll see if you also believe, are there scientific things to be discovered? Can camels be a source of healing? Can you go from being shy around people from other countries to being comfortable enough to talk to anyone in the world? So my answer to these questions is yes, but it wasn't always so. So I hope you'll come along and we can see how one person can get involved and make a difference. So who am I to talk about camels? I'm an American, and growing up, I only saw camels at a zoo, and that probably wasn't more than 1 or 2 times in my whole life. I grew up around horses and cows, not camels. But this is the beauty of camels. They beckon to people around the world. The keepers of camels, they welcome those who love camels and want to know about them. And this has become a really great community for me. And I have been very to meet a lot of great cameleers. This shot with some baby camel at the beautiful Oasis Camel Dairy in California. So how did I get into this whole camel world? My background is as a writer, a video producer, speech writer, event planner with the Pentagon, with aerospace companies, things like that. So this was very far from anything to do with milk. So this picture of my son and I, when he was very little, it tells part of the start of the story. You can see his red cheeks here if you look close. They're very pink, but they were actually very red sometimes. That was a sign of allergic response to dairy and sugar before I knew about camel milk. At the time, I was an American writer, as I had said. I had gotten a master's degree and I wrote a novel. I was very excited. I thought I was going to publish it. But then my son was diagnosed when he was almost 3. And this is a very common age for children to get diagnosed if they're in the countries where they can diagnose rather early, which is not all countries. So I had to drop everything in my life to help him. Everything, novel, writing, personal life, everything. That's what often you have to do to help your children when they have a significant problem. So I devoted all my time to him, parenting, research, and that's what moved me into starting to get into biological science. So this journey started with fear for me. I'd spent 5 years since his diagnosis devoted to him and his needs. I had taken him to doctors. I did a lot of research. He had seen many specialists. He had speech, ABA, which is a certain type of therapy, diet, medications, intensive parenting. We were doing maybe 40 hours a week of therapies and then lots of things around the clock too. He responded very well to diet and medications. Diet is a big thing for people in the autism community because it does help many of the children and adults. But then he passed a kindergarten readiness test detected with no signs of autism. So he was a real success story as far as what he was able to do with the right support. So I wrote this book called A Real Boy, a true story of autism, early intervention and recovery. And it was all about that journey, both the emotional parts of it, which are very significant when you're dealing with these situations, but then also weaving in the information that helped my son. So unfortunately, around that time, I became a single mother. And this was a fate that I had always feared. To have a very high needs child and be by yourself is really very challenging and can also be quite dangerous if you have a child that kind of is very hyperactive and things like that, like my son was. So right after I got separated and was about to become a single mother, I was at a children's book festival and a camel happened to be there and it changed everything. So if you'll indulge me a little bit, since this is a library type of situation that we're in here, the wonderful King Abdulaziz Public Library, I'll read just a couple pages for you and that will set us up for the discussion to follow. So this is chapter 1. It's called Meeting the Camel. The camel stands calmly, munching something hay-like, placid in her dirty blonde summer coat. Her great head grows like a question mark from the curve of her muscular neck. Her padded leathery feet keep her comfortable on the bare spots of the lawn. She ignores the children offering pink tufts of cotton candy, staring at her with freckles ringing the O's of their open mouths. This camel was trundled in a horse van to this college in Orange County, California, 2 hours and a rocky mountain from her home in fire-scorched farm country. Her eyes watch the humans scattered on the green grass at this Sunday afternoon book festival. Her lashes hide the clear inner eyelid that will automatically close if an unlikely coastal sandstorm roars in. This camel knows her mission. She tolerates the admiring glances and rude remarks like a camel doing here. She knows that her human owner, the alpha bull of her herd, is nearby if she needs him. Little can faze her, as she has no natural predators and a nuanced, startled reflex. Although fluttering fabric and sudden movements may annoy her, her eyes express a confident view of her place in the world, composed in this moment of a task, the pen that holds her, and something to nibble with a little water on the side. Today, her job is to be a camel hair. What she doesn't know is that her blood can work medical miracles. Her flesh is kin to that of million-dollar racing camels. Her organs are debated, and her milk has healed the sick for centuries. She's about to launch a movement that will drive her species sky high, that people will clamor for the milk she gives, which will help fuel a modern resurgence of her kind. Neither do I. At this moment, she's just a camel, and I'm just a fearful, newly separated. She will inspire me to seek the surprising remedy for my son's autism symptoms and become a camel milk expert. This creature will throw me into research, dispatch me across the US, India, and the United Arab Emirates. Send my words to places like Malaysia, Sweden, England, Cyprus, Mongolia, France, and Pakistan. She'll cause scoffing and admiration, inspire scientific research in many products. But now I stand by her broadside, as bored as she is, watching her. She's tall and stolid, seemingly unflappable. Camels are like that, able to keep going without complaint for miles and kilometers. I spot a flapping tent behind her and walk over to investigate. There are small white bottles of camel milk lotion and soap. I lift a smooth, wavy bar to smell it, and the scent of lavender moves across my lip. A man in a green baseball cap shifts behind the counter. Hi, I say, is that your camel? Yes, sure is. We make soap and lotion from camel milk, very natural and healthy stuff. Then I ask, what else did they do with the milk? I don't know why. Perhaps boredom is driving me to this chat, or maybe that's how I am, always curious. They give it to premature babies in hospitals in the Middle East. It's supposed to not cause any allergies, he says. Really? It's non-allergenic milk? It's said to be close to mother's milk, like breast milk. Thanks. And look at my son, Jonah, sitting on a nearby slope. His 4 years of autism therapy have cost $500,000. Right now, he's a happy, blue-eyed 7-year-old charmer, fitting few people's idea of autism. But a trace amount of milk can send him in a trance, staring at a wall or laughing at nothing. He can disappear inside his head or up a ladder, atop a wall, or anywhere. Or one day, I worry out of his classroom and into special ed. I bring my son to the camel, stand him before the rounded belly and single hump. I tell him, it's a camel, and he says, okay, Mom, I have to find this milk. So now that we know how the whole thing started, this was my idea. I hoped that it would boost my son's immune system and allow for his autism symptom improvement, because all my past research had indicated that that was the case for him and many, many other children. So at that time, I went home that afternoon, I looked on the internet, and there was absolutely nothing about camel milk and autism, and almost nothing about camel milk. There were just a few strange articles about wound healing and what else? Let's see, the difficulties of making cheese, that's a big one. So there were a few things to help me along the way, and then that was just like autism, because there were no experts or data at that time, and autism is also a very confusing thing that is multifactorial. And there is also no real official cause or medical treatment for autism. So that hadn't stopped me with autism. So why did it stop me with camel milk? It didn't. So that was just my intuition and insight. I knew his immune system was disrupted because of his blood work. And meeting the camel man was a cue to trigger my intuition. And what I heard about the milk fit that pattern for my son, and it moved me to action. And parental intuition is a key to treating autism. So how did I get camel milk? I asked for help. I could not find it in America. I would try to find people with camels and write to them, and no one would ever write me back. So a few months later, I found a new paper in 2006 about autism and camel milk. Dr. Reuven Yagil, a great camel veterinarian, had written a paper about some children in Israel getting better off camel milk. He had done another paper with the scientists about food allergies, and those were two of the big things for me. I thought to myself, you're on the right track. And I just kept going. So then I met finally a Pakistani American friend, and he says, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to bring you some camel milk back. It was like fantastic. So he called me. He said, I'm at the airport. Do you want the good news or the bad news first? And I said, well, give me the bad. And he said, well, they threw it away here because I didn't have permission, but I've got you a phone number. So I called to Israel. I started talking to different people. I talked to a doctor, a cancer researcher named Dr. Gonin. We made a hypothesis about camel milk and autism. He knew about camel milk, I knew about autism, we put it all together. And this is a person, this is Eyal, and he is in Israel, and he would get the camels from the Bedouins there and help them send their milk to market. So this is a picture of him. So then finally, I flew it in. Holding those raw, frozen bottles of milk from the desert in my hands felt like a leap across time and space. I never dreamed that nomadic people were still alive in the desert. Sitting here in America, I thought they were part of history. I had no idea. And it was a very special moment and changed my life and my ways of thinking. And I was very, very grateful to these people that I had never laid eyes on in my life. So here I am with the boxes of frozen raw camel milk from the desert. And I had done my due diligence on the safety as best I could. So I don't want you to think I just ran out and got raw milk without asking the proper questions. So here we are. And then that's what raw bottles of, that's what frozen bottles of camel milk look like. They look the same if they're raw or pasteurized generally, but that's just a sample of what they look like. These are not the ones from Israel because those are bigger. These are American bottles, but you can get the idea. So this is my own clinical experiment. My little guy, on October of 2007, I gave him a half a cup of milk with cereal at bedtime. And the next morning, it was absolutely astonishing how different he was. He was so changed. Yeah. Try. Okay, happy to do it. Okay. So the next day, he was so different. It was remarkable. He came down the stairs and he didn't drag his feet like he usually did. He sat at the breakfast table and he started cutting his food without it slipping and sliding the knife and fork all over the place. And he started saying things like, I really love you. You know, you're really great. You do so much for me. You make my food, you make my medicines. You guys are really great, really amazing. So that was really a very shocking moment. His improvement was so fast overnight that I was stunned. I was not even sure it was true, but it was true and I knew it. So I kept giving it to him, the same amount every day. Within 3 days, he could cross the parking lot alone without me hanging on to his collar. A lot of parents have to hold on to their children's collar or their arm when they're in public so the children don't run or bolt away to keep them safe. And so I remember we were walking and we were at a stoplight and I was holding on to him. And he said, "Let go, Mom." And he looked both ways, turned his head. And when it was time to walk, he walked by himself. And then he was able to walk in a parking lot without the cars endangering him. So that was also remarkable. And one of the reasons why I gave it to him at that time was that he was having these terrible behavior breakdowns. Like everything would be okay, and then he would just start acting really wild. And I would give him some food, and it would slow him down a little, but it didn't solve the problem. No one knew what to do. When I gave him the camel milk, those behavior breakdowns stopped. It was absolutely remarkable. So as the weeks went on, the improvements continued. A lot of our children have systemic issues with their immune system. And so they have symptoms like things that show in the skin. He had little white bumps under his cheeks, or they'll have that really pink, red, inflamed look, or they'll look kind of puffy around the eyes. Now, the white bumps on his cheeks faded. He also had some other manifestations on his skin, on his body, that all got better. He was able to leave a school for ADHD children for public school. At the age of 9, he tested with the college level vocabulary, and he was just so much easier to manage because I would give him the milk and it would help him so much, just calm him down more. So in the early years, I was still flying this milk in from Israel all the time. It cost me a lot of money and it was always high risk because I had to come many, many hours flying all the way from that area. And so every single time though, it got through, but it was really something because at Los Angeles airport, there was a veterinarian who was very supportive of what I was doing. He would help me bring it in. But then he said, you really need to call the United States government and get permission. I did not want to do that because I was really worried that it would be a big bureaucratic process, having worked for the federal government myself at the Pentagon. I know how that paperwork goes. And he said, you really need to. So I did. I called the United States Department of Agriculture. I met a very kind person, and she actually worked it through the system. And this is all of doctor's letters. And I got approval to import that milk. So that was probably the first time that had been done. But then it was always a very difficult thing to do. I mean, easy, but it was high risk. So I found out in 2011, we have people in America. They are called Amish people. And they are very conservative. They're very religious, faith-based community. They believe in living apart from the world and being very strict, adherent on their religion. And they just don't like to interact with the world a lot because they feel it keeps them more pure and on their religious track. So they had started milking camels because they love the land. They love working hard. They don't want an easy life. They like to work hard. They feel that that's good for them. And so they had started milking camels. And I found that out on the internet. And so I actually reached out and I got some of that American Amish camel milk, and I got it and I gave it to my son, and it worked the same. So at that time, it was very, very important. It was a very important scientific insight because he's the first person my son ever heard of that had camel milk from 2 different countries. No one knew back then, is it the camel or is it the feed or the herbs that it eats in the desert? Is it the breed? No one knew that. So now we had proof in my son that the milk itself from 2 different countries could work the same way. So that's when I realized maybe it's safe now for me to tell the public about this. So because I can get camel milk, even if for some reason I can't get it in the country anymore. So I went and wrote an article that went viral, and it kicked off new interest in camel milk around the world and was translated overnight into quite a few languages. This is called Got Camel Milk. So that was a big moment in this journey. So as the year went on, the results continued to be amazing. I realized that it worked as an antidote to food problems. When many people eat food and it doesn't sit well with them, it can fire their allergic response. This is very common in autism symptoms. So it may not be technically a food allergy, but it is a food intolerance, and it creates a state of allergic response, and that can become chronic and lead to chronic inflammation. So this camel milk, when my son would get cheese or milk or something, or even sugar, I would give it to, because that would cause problems with him right away. You could see it. And even if you can't see in some of these children, it's still causing problems. So after that, after he would get something that was bad, and he would start have a stomach hurt, or he would start having wild and wacky behavior, I would give him camel milk, and in 15 to 20 minutes, boom, he's back to baseline, and he's even apologizing for being wild and crazy, which wasn't his fault. But so he tolerated sugar and carbohydrates much better. Overall, he had a 30% improvement in autism symptoms. And so I wrote a medical journal article for global advances in health and medicine. It's now cited by other researchers, quite a few researchers now. And that caught the attention of quite a few scientists, and I started speaking at conferences, and the little tiny camel milk industry began to grow. So me, I'm like everybody else. Once you really learn about camels, they start to become more and more fascinating. And I thought, this is just something the world needs to know more about. And there's really not that much about it, so I guess I have to do it. So I started spending a lot of time with camels in the US, Middle East, India. I spoke with cameleers from Somalia, right in our own country. Kenya, right in our country, we have a lot of Somali people here in the United States. And they love their camels. They're camel crazy country. And Kenya, Mexico, Europe, Mongolia, Central Asia, Morocco, Mauritania, lots of places. So I read a lot of the camel literature in science, but that was very teeny tiny at the time. It didn't take long because there wasn't much. I introduced camel people to each other to help build a network, and I would go out and ride camels and spend time with them. And the gentleman at the lower right is a member of the Somali community in America, and what a font of wisdom this respected elder is. And I spent time with him, and you can hear what he has to say in Camel Crazy. So how did this book happen? I was getting so many messages asking for help. It was taking me a lot of time, which I was happy to do, but writing the same thing over and over again to individuals was becoming very, very complex in terms of time. So, and people everywhere in my life were surprised by this journey. Everyone asked questions about the milk, the camels, the people. So as a writer, I felt it was time for a book, but I knew that wasn't going to be easy because it was such a niche topic. So I started publishing camel-related essays in 2016, but it was not easy to get the media interested because in the United States, it's gotten a tiny bit better, but not too much. It's very difficult to get people's interest in camels. So this particular one happened because I met Netha Raika on Facebook. He's a young man who's a member of the Raika community, that camel community in India that are camel caregivers for centuries. And Netha was trying very hard to keep camels afloat in his life, which is an unusual path for a young man these days in Rajasthan. So I met him and I thought he would make a great topic for an article. And so I was able to write an article about India's camel legislation that has had an impact on their camels dropping, unfortunately. But this is also how I met Dr. Ilse, because everyone was saying, you've got to talk to Dr. Ilse. So fortunately I did, and that's how we met. But writing this book took a ton of research, travel, lots of time. I won't bore you with all the details, but my wonderful publisher, New World Library, loved it. It fit their mission, animals, traditional wisdom, and helping humans. And it has a story, it has science. I used cultural fact-checking people because you want to make sure you're being respectful and accurate when you're writing about people of different faiths and cultures. And fortunately, scientists, doctors, farmers, even best-selling authors and people with autism have endorsed it. It's a personal journey with camels. This is the first nomad I ever met. This is the talented El Hadji Kumama from Niger. I met him right here in California at a jewelry party where he was selling his jewelry from the desert where these people have done it for centuries. And so he told me how living like a nomad was wonderful, and it helped me imagine a different worldview. And the book outlines the gut-brain connection and the role of food, inflammation, and other factors in autism. So it's been my privilege also to lift the voices of camel keepers and tell people why they deserve so much respect. And of course, the book itself contains a user's guide on how to buy, prepare, and serve camel milk with lots of information in it. Pretty much everything you need to know is in there. And you will want to do some preparation if you have a child with autism or on the autism spectrum yourself, perhaps, to get the maximum benefit out of it. All the information is in there. There's beautiful color photos of the animals and people that your family could enjoy, and it's suitable for giving to doctors. And it tells you, of course, it's now sold globally. Luckily, it was nominated for a Nautilus Book Award, and we won a silver medal. So that is quite nice. And I've tons of events now, and I'm happy to do it because it's something that needs to be shared. I say here, a miracle should be shared. And I use the word miracle loosely because it is based. It's not like it comes nowhere, but it can be miraculous for many, many people. So what I do is advise, write, and talk to vets, doctors, companies, farmer communities, and parents. I still visit camel farms, and all countries have autism and other disorders that camel milk can help now because it's not just autism. And the great thing about camels also is that they bring out the fathers. Anything that brings out fathers to be involved in caring for their children with autism is fantastic because that's work that often falls on the mother, and the dads like camel milk, and I'm all here for that. And I would like to add that female veterinarians have been in the forefront of this movement, like Dr. Ilse and some others. And of course, we have great support from male veterinarians as well. And my son supports my work, and others with autism do too, including the renowned Dr. Stephen Shore, who is a person with autism, a professor, an international lecturer, and a board member of Autism Speaks. And so I'm very grateful to have his support as well. That's my son and I. We're in California. But when I see this photo, because my son and I have our arms around each other here, and we're looking at camels. And when I see this photo, I recall the verse from the Quran, will they not look at the camels, how they are made? it's talking about how the camel was made for you and it will do all these wonderful things for you and how you should use it. So I always think of that. It is always a pleasure to look at camels and think about how wonderful they are. So now, before we go to the next section, we'll stop here. We're going to be talking about autism, and we'll bring back Dr. Ilse for just a minute for a chat.
Yes, Christina, thank you so much. I would really like to emphasize here how important your work has been to get recognition of camel milk here in India, where some 20 years ago, it was actually illegal to sell camel milk, and a camel milk seller from Udaipur, he was actually put into jail because the court said camel milk is hazardous to your health. So we had to take the case to the Supreme Court to get him released, basically. And it's actually only 3 or 4 years ago that camel milk in India became legal, when the Food Standards and Safety Authority of India finally accepted it and defined standards. And if this hadn't happened, it would have been impossible to open up a camel dairy here in India, which by now makes an enormous difference, both to the livelihoods of camel breeders and also to autistic children. So in our dairy, about 80% of the customers are autistic children. So it's, I can't wait to hear more now about the theories behind autism. Please start your second part.
Thank you, Dr. Ilse. It is not anything that I ever foresaw, being able to help the pastoralists in India and other countries like this when I started, but it is one of the great honors and pleasures of my life to be able to impact the pastoralists in other countries and here. So I'm deeply appreciative of hearing that. It's wonderful. And of course, that wouldn't be possible without a lot of your work as well. You are the most patient, devoted person on the behalf of the Indian cameleer that could possibly exist. So, all right, we'll talk really quickly about autism. A lot of you that don't know about autism, I'll try not to go too deep for you, but some of it I think you will find important. This is a rising global issue. Used to, hardly anyone knew someone with autism. Now somebody knows somebody with autism pretty much wherever you go. So autism is rising globally. The US rate is now 1 out of every 36 children, if you base that on parental, doctor, and medical reports. The increase is new. Systems were not in place before for all these people, and now the resources are getting highly strained. Autism has always been with us, but the difference is a lot of people that may have been that phenotype were much milder, and therefore they were not really labeled. And the moderate to severe forms of autism were considered rare. When I first started this, autism was considered rare at 1 out of every 10,000 people. Now, yes, sometimes they have, said before, oh, they used to be called intellectually disabled people. Now we call it autism, but that only accounts for a very small slice. And the book explains all that kind of thing. So autism rates seem to rise along with the more industrialized lifestyles and of course, greater identification. But there really is a link in many science publications now: immune dysfunction, gut-brain issues, environmental issues like pollution, power lines, traffic, pesticides. They can all raise the risk, and foods, of autism happening. So everything moves very slowly in autism, just like it does in camels and camel milk. I actually think that camel milk might be catching up on autism now as far as the movement of the science, which would be something. So autism does have some genetic involvement, but there are no universally shared or recognized genetics and biology to autism. There are different subtypes of autism. Brain treatments for autism, schizophrenia, and these type of brain disorders are very high cost and low success when you're talking about the pharmaceutical industry. So not a lot of research is done because they have tried it before, but the outcomes are not really good and they're not really going to make much money. So it's very difficult. Autism as a target for pharma, very hard. How did this move? So most research only gets done if there's big money for drugs, and these things like natural treatments, who can patent camel milk? It's not easy, so you're not going to get big money out of it. Therefore, it's not really worth it to the big guns and putting a lot of research into this. So I have a graphic of fast food here because our society has moved much more toward industrialized and packaged food. It's wrapped in plastic, which we know plastics have bad effect now on a lot of things. And there was a study a couple years ago, 25% of your gut microbiome in this study population in America was killed by one serving of fast food per week. And it went up to like 75% of your gut microbiome was killed by 2 servings or more a week. So it's really a very unhealthy situation that we're facing with the food supply. And camel milk helps enhance that gut-brain connection. So let's get to some beautiful faces that show us why we're doing this kind of thing. This new documentary called Camel Milk and Autism that I have just completed with the Doongar College Green Chemical Research Center in India shows the before and after of some children. So this first child that we have here, he's from India. There's a lot of other, I have video and pictures of these children, but we'll just make it short for today. He was deeply into computers. He was in his own world. That's a phrase you usually hear with autism. No sustained eye contact, not active. He'd lay on his bed with his iPad. He'd sit in his chair watching cartoons over and over. So, that's the kind of thing we're seeing here. And then after camel milk, he's playing, more active. He was smiling, looking at the camera, things like that. So the second child is quite dramatic. This little second child here, he was 2.5, 2.5, when we see his face on the left. You can see the sunken hollows under his eyes, the pink inflammation around his eyes. He had no eye contact, no social smile. He looks lost or in his own world. But the most sad thing is, look at the bruises on his head. He was headbanging so hard himself against the counters and the walls with constant self-injury. That happens in autism sometimes. He had no language, and he was already casein-free. That means free of other animal milks, which is something that often helps autistic children. The only help he was given by doctors and therapists was they told his mother, buy a helmet so it will protect his head, and he wouldn't even put it on his head. After camel milk, this child's self-injury stopped with the first ounce, she says. His skin cleared, his language flooded in, and these are her words. His eye contact improved, his social smile was present. He is glowing. I mean, look at him. So it's just amazing. He's 4.5 years old on the right. So you can see he's just got that glowing picture of health. He's smiling, his face looks better, everything. I think that's a good representation. This is another child. Ethan was 7 years old and living in Sydney, Australia. Camel milk helped him so much. In May 2019, he was having meltdowns and aggressions so many times a day that would last for hours. He would not even hold a pen. A meltdown is a situation where the child or person with autism becomes so upset and overwhelmed that they may scream, refuse to engage, have aggression, just get locked into their own self for hours over and over and over. So this is where Ethan was at the time. Camel milk has stopped his meltdowns and his aggression. It has helped him so much now to even reach his academic goals. These are clips from a video where he does all this really great math, and he's so cute on the video. He's narrating all the math he's doing, 10 times 10, 10 times 12. And at the very end, he looks up to the mom and he goes, good job, saying to himself. So he's doing very well. I see clips of this child on a regular basis. So camel milk and autism are both kind of outside the mainstream, medically and scientifically in a way, even though that's slowly changing. Why is that? People use alternative methods when their needs are not met by the medical establishment. This happens in diseases with no effective treatment or easy pharmaceutical options, like autism. Camel milk is not yet fully understood, even though we know a lot about it now in the camel milk science world. but it's not a farmer product. And so you don't really get a ton of support for it yet, which is another reason why today is a wonderful event that we're having thanks to the ICO. And people prefer natural options, not medications for their children. And camel milk is natural, requires no prescription, but it's little known because it's held by rural cultures and has low visibility to science. Just for fun, these are some Amish camel milk products from Pennsylvania, from one of my farms I visit. There's camel yogurt on the right and camel milk in the center, and then fermented camel milk on the left and some soap. There we go. So we'll take a quick pause here and segue into our science behind camel milk section, which will be short, but a little bit interesting, I hope. Over to you, Dr. Ilse.
Yeah, Christina, it's almost unbelievable the effects that you are describing. It kind of boggles the mind. And you said earlier that, there is no, in order to develop a drug, it takes a lot of money. And the issue here is that the camels are actually owned, by very poor people, by the poorest people in the world, the extreme nomads, whether here in India or in Pakistan or in North Africa, it's really the poor people who are sitting on this enormous asset. So we really must find a way of, connecting better the camel herders and the patients who can benefit from it. And I think that's a very important issue. I feel very strongly about. And you are right saying that people are going now for natural treatment. And I mean, there's no more natural treatment than camel milk. And you were also saying earlier that the effect of camel milk it's something species specific. It does not depend on the diet of the camels because it worked, whether it came from Israel or whether you bought it in the United States. And I think that's true. It's species specific. But in addition, there's also the issue of the diet of the camels. And I believe that camels who, browse on a very biodiverse vegetation, here in India, they're grazing on 36 Ayurvedic plants. That also makes a difference. That actually, in order to enhance the medicinal value of camel milk, it would be better if they were, not put into farms. And then, we follow the same system for dairy cows. But if they were staying out in the, in the environment with their herders, which would, benefit the camels as well as the herders and also the patients.
I do agree with you. I do. So my point in saying that is that, it showed that camel milk was good from different countries because of the camel itself. But I do agree that the feed does matter and that it can enhance things greatly. The stage of lactation matters, like a lot of things matter. And Dr. Ilse, you are 100% correct that some of these heritage herbs and things that they graze on traditionally help make some of the best camel milk in the world. And I just wish that we could replicate that everywhere. So that's another giant endeavor. But yes, having camel milk from a source raised by traditional pastoralists, such as in India, Palestine, all these other different places, Saudi Arabia, everywhere that Bedouins are, that is going to be your greatest camel milk. So,
yeah.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about the science behind this amazing substance. Here we see some photos from the wonderful dairy in Dubai, where I was visiting and seeing how camels are getting bred so that we can have more wonderful camel babies. So camel immunology holds a lot of promise for humans. Camels are unique. They're not really like any other mammal, except camelids. They're part of the camelid family. So that's vicuñas, guanacos, alpacas, llamas. They're a family called camelids. So their immunology is quite special. So camels being part of that family, they are also sharing some of that unique antibody, nanobody capacity that we'll talk about in just a minute. So first we'll just touch on these oval blood cells. Who knows what they have to do with all of this great medical resistance to disease that camels have. But camels have oval blood cells. That's one of the unique things about them. They can swell up with water when they need to. And then when they go into these very harsh environments, the camels, they can squeeze down these blood cells into an oval shape that allows them to be more slippery in the bloodstream and to keep things circulating. So they can go for a very long time without water. It's reputed up to 30 days, even though you don't want to do that if you don't have to. But then when they get to water and they can suck up a whole bunch in a very short time, those blood cells rehydrate and rehydrate like a full football. And that process might kill a regular mammal, but the camels are absolutely fine with it. And so I talk about some of their special characteristics, like this great water recycling system they have, and all kinds of amazing things in the book Camel Crazy, if you'd like to know more. And I think it would be fun to know more, but that's just me, I'm camel crazy. So with as far as the camel antibodies, we can see here that they have special properties. They only have heavy chain antibodies, like we see on the left, not light and heavy chain antibodies, as we see on the right, like most species. So sharks and camels are some of these two living creatures that we know about with this. It's extremely rare. So these antibodies have the quality of resisting pathogens very, very well. We don't know if that comes partly from the intense survivability of the animal in its challenging conditions, but it probably was inspired by that. So this is a very ancient gene family, but somehow humans are able to use it in their bodies. It's quite amazing. So these camel and camelid nanobodies have extreme medical potential for diagnosis and therapies for humans. Snake bite, cancer, platforms for vaccine development, immunotherapy, antiviral therapy, and they may neutralize beta coronaviruses. So since we all care greatly about coronaviruses right now, let's take a quick look at this. There is a photo of this, this llama, but I'm just going to stick with the diagram right now. This is Cormac. Cormac was immunized for COVID several times, and then they derived this amazing nanobody from him. So how this worked is a drop of blood was taken from a llama, in this case, Cormac. The blood contains many tiny antibodies. The research team at NIH, under the leadership of David Brody, identified a few of interest, which showed weak binding to the virus, the coronavirus. So that was some weak binding, but the research team engineered those antibodies, creating new nanobodies, which is a very little small portion of them that are very tiny. They can bind very tightly. So the new nanobodies bind to the spike of the coronavirus, blocking it. They bind to the spike, and the virus could not enter human cells, and it was therefore neutralized. And I have another graphic with them binding to the spike, but that would be too much science. So the great thing about this, though, these nanobodies that they came up with can be made into an aerosol, and you can actually breathe them in like through an inhaler. So I would really love to see that developed, because imagine what it would be like to have an easily portable inhaled solution that's going to protect the coronavirus from inhabiting your lungs. I mean, that would be pretty great. Okay, so how would camel milk work? I mean, we do know a lot more about it now, but it's still a rich research topic. So first of all, it's an ancient healing remedy. I'm far from the first person this level to discover that camel milk has incredible curative, we don't say cure for autism or anything, but curative powers for many diseases and disorders. Throughout history, people in countries where they have camels have known that this is a very special substance and has been given for free to sick people in many parts of the world, traditionally. And it has several mechanisms of action that we know about right now. So it is based on the camel, as Ilse and I have talked about. The feed, the breed, and the season may affect the content. The immunoglobulins may kill antigens, which is a fancy way of saying, attack some germs. The known protective proteins in camel milk are mainly enzymes with antibacterial and immunological properties, especially lactoferrin, plus probiotics. It also contains GABA, which may enhance sort of a calming effect in the brain, and maybe why some people with schizophrenia and autism have a more calming, clear, kind of peaceful day. So insulin may play a role. It is delivered to the human body more effectively in camel milk than it is other milks, because it actually can get destroyed quite easily in the body when it's in other milks. But the casein micelles of camel milk are very well shaped and sized so that it seems to be survivable into the gut, so to be sort of uptaken by the rest of the body. It is an antioxidant. It decreases oxidative stress, which is a really important part of keeping ourselves healthy. And that is a common condition in autism. And some of the best early research on this has come out of Saudi Arabia, a wonderful study about camel milk in groups of autistic children, and they were able to measure the oxidative stress, and it corresponded with their decrease in symptoms. It's anti-inflammatory. It also doesn't have those pesky B-lactoglobulin whey proteins. This is the kind of main cow milk allergen that creates an opioid effect in people with autism and a leaky gut. And by opioid effect, it kind of acts as if like an opioid and kind of makes them kind of out of their present surroundings, in their own world, and detached. And so those are some of the symptoms we sometimes see in autism, which diets can improve, and camel milk can improve even more. Now, again, this is not every person with autism. You have to try it to find out, but it's quite a few. It may positively infect gut bacteria, and we know now that that's linked to better brain health, decreased autism symptoms, and also aging well and other issues. So scientific literature now has progressed to the point where it says it's safe and effective. There's a clinical benefit for humans and animals. And some of the conditions are autism, food allergies, diabetes, cancer, infectious diseases, heavy metal toxicity, colitis, and alcohol-induced toxicity. And my personal anecdotal reports, by that I mean things that I collect, that I hear, that are not published in a study, but they're anecdotes, include failure to thrive, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, severe diarrhea, type 2 diabetes, mast cell disorders, which you also see an overlap in the food allergy and autism community, PANS and PANDAS, that's pediatric acquired neurological symptoms, and it causes all kinds of OCD and horrific symptoms for people to have that condition, mostly children. Skin issues, some inherited disorders, bowels, useful during chemo and surgery, and even possibly brain injury. I just have a new case where the brain injury was resolved very, very quickly after they added camel milk. So quickly, we've already heard some of the great things about what camel milk can do in children with autism, but one of the big surprises for me was motor planning and spatial awareness. I never expected that it would impact the motor planning of children with autism, because that's one of their issues, like their motor skills. And so my son's got so much better after that than a lot of children do. So don't worry, you don't have to write this all down right now, because it's in the book and you don't have to worry about memorizing it. So this is a new thing I'm sharing here today for the first time. This is Rena Solomon. She is a member of the ICO. She has a ranch here in California. She's also a well-known person. She's a disaster rescuer. She goes to national disaster locations here in America in a Hummer, and she helps people rescue their animals, do what she can in fires, floods, things like that. So Rena was unfortunately diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. She was put on the following drugs: metformin, Trulicity, and then insulin. And the Trulicity made her very sick. So she started frozen camel milk, but she said it didn't help enough. So she actually bought camels to try their own fresh raw milk. Now that is a luxury item. Wouldn't that be great? We could all do it. She took 16 ounces a day for 6 months, and she was able to stop her insulin and the Trulicity. Her A1C dropped to 5.5 on camel milk and metformin. So this is where she is right now. And that's a very controllable level for people that have diabetes. Her blood sugar drops under 100 after she drinks the fresh camel milk, and the pain in her hands also stopped. So you always have to ensure your milk is from safe sources. I have an easy home pasteurization method in Camel Crazy. If you want to get raw camel milk in some of the countries where they have MERS, which we do not have in the United States or Australia, but some of the Middle Eastern countries, they have it. So you can actually get raw milk and pasteurize your own if it's legal, to get raw milk in your country. Sometimes it's not. But if you have your own camel or you are able to access it, then you can pasteurize it yourself to stay safe. And then that's all in the book. Now, these pictures are from an Amish farm in Pennsylvania. They milk the camel, goes right into this pitcher, and then that little white paper thing on the left is actually a filter. So they pour the camel milk through that filter and filter out impurities, and then you can drink it straight after that. And this is what camel milk looks like when it's being sent across distances. It's in a styrofoam box to keep it nice and frozen, and it works very well. Putting bottles next to each other when they're frozen turns out to help keep them frozen. Okay, we're going to move to our last section, and we'll have Dr. Ilse come back while we talk a little bit about camels and where we are today.
Yes, thank you, Christina. I mean, it's really obvious that there's a huge field for research out there, and to get statistical data that are being accepted by the medical establishment, because I feel, I mean, we camel lovers, we say all these things about how wonderful camel milk is and how therapeutic, but I also see that very often doctors are very hesitant. And I also like that you said that actually there is already, a huge body of traditional knowledge on the benefits of camel milk. And exactly one can learn from, the camel cultures, how, about the effects of camel milk. And a few aspects you didn't point out, I would like to add as one, it's very good for tuberculosis. And it was actually earlier used in the Russian countries systematically to treat tuberculosis. And tuberculosis is a huge problem in places here like India. And we've actually started to supply camel milk to TB patients here in the vicinity. I also think it has potential for anemia because it has that high iron content, 10 times that of cow milk. So, that would be an anemia is so widespread among, pregnant women, lactating women, especially in the desert. So it would be wonderful if one could connect the dots here. And then one little anecdote I want to say, I mean, we actually have quite a few customers who call us and they want to take camel milk because they think it increases their height. And we have calls from models, who said, please send me camel milk. I need it just half an inch taller. Then I can go in the model business. So this is also a widespread belief. And
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Well, and you and I have both been party to this issue for quite a while. So I have seen that in many of the children that are failure to thrive, infants, they have actually started being able to tolerate food, and then they gain weight and they, are able to thrive. So that's one of the great uses for camel milk. And so could that lead to height? Possibly, I don't know. This is one of those things that's anecdote. We don't know yet, but it certainly can't hurt. I mean, and it's probably very good for bone health as well. And then Ilse, I would suggest that next time the models call, you can see if they can get this camel oil lipstick from China that I was given as a gift. I'm sure they won't be able to, but I think it's a darling little package with the camels on it. Now, just to address really briefly what she pointed out, in my book, I definitely have a call for action at the end. And this is what she's saying and I say. The emphasis on clinical studies and industry funding in science has tended to exclude traditional knowledge, ignoring the voices of people outside the scientific mainstream that could lead to new insights. Science affects everyone's lives, but it remains a highly exclusive club. If you are poor, non-white, non-Western, female, or not formally educated, your knowledge and experience are often dismissed as irrelevant. So that's what we need to change. So, yeah. Okay, so yes, we'll talk a little about camels now. This is a very funny-faced camel at the Oasis Camel Dairy in California near me, so he can get us started. So what's so special about camels? They are amazing. They emerged about 50 million years ago. They are highly adaptive. That means that they have become very, very specialized in the features on their bodies. They're definitely some strange looking creatures. When you first look at them, if you're me in America, you're thinking, well, I know horses. How does this equate to a horse? It just doesn't. So it's a very unique creature to get used to. It looks funny. A lot of people say camels are made by a committee where everyone just focused on one part and put them together. But they are beautiful to me. And once you get to know how amazing they are, there's no more attractive creature because they're just so special. There are at least 20 million camels in America. I mean in the world, we think, but all the estimates are inaccurate. We still need a good overall survey. But they're found in some surprising places. Lots of countries have camels, even if you don't think of them as having camels. Often they have made their way into these little places around the world you would not expect. Of course, they're very different from cows, goat, and sheep. The UN, back in 2006, I think it was, declared the camel milk a superfood. And I wish that had kicked off more at the time, but progress is very slow, as we know, but at least that was a good start. And while Bactrian milk is wonderful and all that too, dromedaries are usually the main source for dairies, and that's the one hump camel. The Bactrian is 2 humps. So that's what you need to know as far as that. Camels are very different, as we said, in biology. They are very smart. They have the intelligence of a young child. So some cameleers I know say they would guess they're around the same as an 8-year-old child. But then I was in Texas at a conference and an Australian cameleer said, you see that camel there? That camel is smart. He's like a 12-year-old kid. And he hadn't even talked to me about this whole age thing, which is, camels are not like humans. I'm not trying to make them like that, but it's a bit of an equivalence there. So camels bond very strongly to their human owners. Bulls dominate the herd, but females do all the regular daily work. So bulls can be very dangerous too. So if you go visit camel herds, just be careful. And if you see this thing right here sticking out of the side of that bull camel's mouth, that's called a dula. And if you see that and you're really close to it, you better run. No, seriously, you don't have to run. Just back away slowly and just be glad that he didn't take his feeling his oats, his spring mood to create babies out, on an innocent human. So young camels are very playful. In the United States, when they're in farms, they can actually kind of cause injury to humans accidentally because humans think that young camels are going to be really easy and cute, but they're still large and they can jump on things and all that. And so females can be, temperamental, but they're really fantastic creatures. But what I would say is because I have many people contacting me now saying, I'm buying camels, I want to get into camels, and I knew they would. So that's why I'm saying seek advice on camel handling before you go out and buy camels. And of course, here's a wonderful Bedouin acquaintance of mine with some beautiful camel babies in Al Ain, UAE. So it's a valuable animal hiding in plain sight. Here's a very large Sudanese camel. That's a very nice contrast. You can see how small the human is. And that's a big camel, which is great. Camels come in all shapes and sizes. There are many, many different types of camels. So here in the West, of course, camels are seen as very unusual, but they're just typical livestock in many countries. So a lot of these places have a whole healing tradition, milk, meat, and fat to help them get over certain illnesses. But this knowledge, as we've said, has been overlooked as medications have become available and nomadic pastoralists have settled or been settled. So milk is still given free as a good deed in many places like Egypt and Africa. And camels thrive if their keepers thrive. So the better the pastoralists do, the better the camels will do. And why do we not have big dairies in the United States yet, which I wish we did? Small numbers in the United States of camels mean that it's hard to scale them up, so to speak, grow them into a big company that somebody will want to buy and make stock in and a whole lot of money. So investment bankers, they are not interested due to that. Fortunately, the International Year of Camelids is coming up, and I'm happy that this is part of the early events to note and celebrate this year. The UN has declared the International Year of Camelids for 2024. They point to the urgent need to raise public awareness of camelids for food security. There are many, many millions of poor families that live in the most hostile ecosystems on the planet. Camels help them fight hunger, extreme poverty. They also empower women because women are often involved in the milk money, can help educate girls with that money and sustain the land. Also, they represent the cultural and spiritual identities of many of these indigenous peoples. And so socially, they're very important. They also constitute what we call genetic biodiversity. These are resources that we need, but we may lose without even knowing what we have and how important it is. So it's a small and growing industry. It's potentially $10.2 billion in 10 years, according to the FAO. It's a fast-growing livestock animal. The demand is rising due to autism and health consumers, plus the Muslim meat and milk market is important. It's not really that supported by most governments yet, but the governments that are role models for the rest of us to support camels. When I started this, there were only a few world dairies. Now there are many around the world. At least 3 million tons of camel milk are officially, but 70% of it is consumed by the owners and never gets to the market. And unfortunately, Saudi Arabia, our host country today, is a top camel milk market. And as a sign of success, fake and adulterated milk is starting to appear. So be very, very careful of where you source your milk. That is always something to remember. So as far as these interesting cultures that produce camel milk, this is a beautiful US Amish Mennonite farm family. I do feature this farmer, Marlon Troyer, in my book, Camel Crazy. He is a very camel crazy guy. He loves animals and he got into this and he loves them, and he has devoted his whole career now to having his camel farm, which produces some excellent milk in this country. And that's his beautiful wife, Savannah, and they have had several children. And they milk camels on 70 acres, and they have a lot of camels now. They're growing all the time. Again, as I said, these communities like to live away from others, and they do business with people outside, but they like to keep their faith strong, and they feel living that rural lifestyle is one way to do it. So nomadic and pastoral wisdom has so much value. Camels and their milk have been the backbone of society for eons. They form the wealth, status, and trading abilities of many cultures. They literally enable people to stay alive. There's a famous saying, different versions in different countries, but no camel, no life, which is the truth. So their lifestyles need recognition. They can benefit us all. These are some nomads in Sudan, the Lahawin tribe. They're moving with this little house. They're moving from migration between the rainy season, after the rainy season. See this little house on the back? That's for women and children. And I will not attempt to say it, but it's a nice, anything you can think of to be on the move and carry all your belongings and protect your family at the same time, they have thought of. So this is a friend of mine, and he's got something on his mind. His name is Sidi Amar. He's a Tuareg nomadic camel herder from Niger. Sidi trains camels here in the United States. He has lived here for many, many years. He exemplifies the great traits of nomadic life. Sidi can sleep anywhere. He can adjust to any group. He can understand animals. His bond between a camel and himself is just amazing. He can interpret exactly what they're thinking and feeling just kind of by looking at them. And so Sidi is here now. He says to me the other day on the phone, if I knew then what I know now, I would be a nomad back home raising my camels. So that's a pretty big statement. Everyone can benefit from nomadic ways. These kind of things may seem very far from us and very remote from us, and physically they might be, but they have a lot to teach us. Societies are healthier when they have the outdoors to engage with. It helps de-stress us, it enriches our microbiome, and enhances our immune system. Dirt, animals, sun, plants, that's what we need. Sidi and I both said at the same time to each other, we come from the dirt, we are part of the dirt. And that's actually truer than we know. So let's teach our children to become comfortable with nature, help them engage with dirt, sand, soil, trees, plants, and animals, manure, even though kids are grossed out by that. You know, it's part of a good gardening system. Fire, water, and raw foods they can cook and going off the grid. No Wi-Fi or phones for a while. Echoing these nomadic traditions will increase their skills and their self-sufficiency. And also engaging with people from other ways of life strengthen our world and create courtesy and respect. So the top is a child getting to enjoy camel milk, lucky kid out in the desert. And the bottom is from a ranch in Florida. It's called La La Land, and they are a member of the ICO. Their program is called TLC Therapy Hooves, and these are what you call Appaloosa alpacas along with camels. And they take them to nursing homes, they serve veterans, they serve lonely people, children. It's just a great way to use animals in a pastoralist inspired system. So our friends as pastoralists need help. There's a low demand for these draft animals now that the tractors have come along, and water and grazing rights are sometimes that issue. Youth are more attracted to screens than they are camels. So if there's more benefit coming from camels, that would be a way to keep the young Rika and other pastoralists engaged with them and make some money rather than looking at it as a dead end. There are a lot of transportation challenges in these dry, arid countries. And even in the United States, you know, it's not the easiest to ship around if it's frozen, but we do have FedEx and it works fine. However, some countries don't have that as easily. And of course, the belief systems in government overall don't really know about camel milk sales, but that is slowly changing. And some of the milk regulations can be a little bit burdensome for the small farmers. So it should be done sensitively with their involvement. And here I am in India at the world famous Pushkar Fair with Rika and other camel folks. Netha Rika, the young man, is to my right. I'm in the hat. And this is sad because every year they bring their camels and every year the price drops lower and lower. And every year it's becoming like an extinct thing, even though it's a giant attraction for Rajasthan. It's a cultural symbol of the state. Nonetheless, the real camels are dropping. So anything that Dr. Ilse and the rest of us can do to help them is welcome. So this is one of the examples of how Dr. Ilse's dairy has done things in the past. So you've got your Rika herder there at the top out milking his camel. The milk is brought and put in jugs on motorbikes. It gets put in this case direct to the family. And it goes straight to a beautiful child. And this child is in southern India, so it was a really, really long distance. And it has to go on a train or a bus. So keeping it frozen and keeping it moving is a real challenge. But this child improved greatly on camel milk, according to his father. So that's some of the what we call the cold chain that needs improving. So obviously things need doing. You can read more about that in the book. But you know, we need more research, we need clinical trials, we need funding for publications and all kinds of things. But I always want people to think about funding camel milk for their patients and the families because it can be expensive, rightfully so, but the families are sometimes overwhelmed with what they're already paying. And so keeping camel milk affordable would be great, even though it's not easy. I view the camel as a vehicle for peace and development. The top right, you can see Mandik, the milk-rich she-camel in blue, the state color of Somalia. And this camel is shown with Somali leaders. Mandik also means something deeply filling your mind, and it's used as a compliment to a dear female, I am told by a Somali friend. So it's a symbol of beauty, it's a symbol of passion, it's a symbol of pride. And it's great to see that they still care so much about their camels. And then the bottom right, we see Dr. Ilse here on a stage. I happened to be at this conference and everyone was talking about these issues. And it was an international conference and more things like that would definitely help. So I view it as a vehicle for peace and development, crossing borders and cultures to help children and sick people. There's nothing better than that for a reason for countries to come together. There's also a great anecdote recently during lockdown. I was on Twitter and someone asked me a question, but I couldn't get back to them right away. She was looking for milk in Rajasthan, in India. She needed it for her son with autism, who that was pretty much all he would eat, that and a couple other foods, and she couldn't get it anymore. And then people started tweeting, and she asked the head of the railway for India, and he responded, and he made a special train stop to bring that camel milk to the child so he would have food during lockdown. And everyone else started asking for it too. And then the railway said, we're going to make a special rule where if a child needs this milk, camel milk during lockdown, we're going to make a special train stop for them. So that is pretty darn remarkable. Camel is good for the world, as we know. Healthy milk, low impact on environment, brings people together, and a great business opportunity. So here we see on the right and right there, and this family to the left with their son had driven very, very far to see me. And I was able to give them some great advice, not just about camel milk, but how to get help for this child. And this is a woman in America at the bottom who is getting a visit from a camel that spreads cheer around the place she lives in during lockdown. So it's a global movement now. Since I began, obviously things have changed a lot. Now thousands and thousands of families around the world are using camel milk. New research is continuing. New companies are distributing it in many countries. And my dream of universal access to camel milk is starting to come true. There I am on the right. The first time I ever saw camel milk for sale in the United States, it was in San Francisco. And I happened to see it and I was very, very happy. And then of course, there's a recent article in Smart Farmer magazine in Kenya, some coverage I did in Rajasthan, and myself and an international scientist at a conference. She is from Egypt. Okay, so what I would like for you to take away from today on a personal level is never be afraid to ask for help. That's what I did. And I was not a person that ever asked for any kind of help from anyone. That was just not how I grew up, and it was not something that I was used to doing. But when it came to getting camel milk for my son, that's what I did. And so I did, and it changed a lot of things. So as a story to illustrate how this can work, about a year ago, I was contacted by a woman in Pakistan, and she was very concerned about two family members, little children, both have autism and one is deaf. And she asked me, ma'am, can you please help, please help? So I did everything I tried. I asked all these people, it wasn't happening. And then I found Debbie Sue Avon, who is also a member of the International Camel Organization. She is here in America. She offered to use her camel named Truman, who you see on the left. And it was during the time of our presidential race. And so she said, Truman needs to run for president and raise some money for these kids. So she had a little campaign called Truman for President. And she brought Truman around to all the neighborhoods and different places so families and children could engage with him. And they also gave money. And now, for the first time, about 2 weeks ago, we sent the first amount of money that was raised to the family in Pakistan so the little girl can get tested and see if she can get a hearing aid. And this drawing is from her, and it's a tree. And I just wanted to say that it's really true that you cannot change, you can change the world by yourself, but you cannot do it I mean, you can change the world, but you cannot do it by yourself. So the power of people to change the world, it can start with you, but you have to have other people help you. But you could be that seed. You could be that person. Just like this woman in Pakistan helped change something for her family member. She's all by herself. She reached out and look what she created for all the children in the community in America. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening, and to remember, that all of us, we might come from different cultures, but we can become dear friends and colleagues. And so I spread the word to help others about camel milk, as you can see in many of my publications. So I hope that you will all do the same. And this is one way you can do it. Camel Crazy explains everything you need to know: camels, milk, where to buy the milk, how to use it, how much to give, all these kinds of things. And it's a fun and easy read. And you can get it, of course, from the King Abdulaziz Public Library online store. And then you can get it from just about any bookstore, online sites all over the world. Hump Group, which sells milk in the UK, can ship it to many places. Copies, the same with Advik Foods of India. They also can ship it to many places, the book and milk. You can look at my website if you like, ChristinaAdamsAuthor.com. I'm on Twitter at Camel Milk Info and the usual suspects, Facebook and Instagram. So we all need more fun in our lives, and I hope this was fun for you today. It certainly was for me. So shukran for listening and learning today. And now let's go back to Dr. Ilse.
Thank you so much. I mean, this was a really inspiring presentation, and I can very much confirm what you said about how the camel connects people across the globe, and it's the camel movement is there, and we all share the same feelings, and we're dedicated, and it's completely global and cross-cultural. So it's a fascinating place to be, the international camel community. I just like to raise I just want to make a little comment. You were saying you wish that there were big camel farms in the US and that some investor would come and build a big camel dairy, maybe like we have them in Dubai or the Emirates. But actually, I think the beauty of the camel is, we don't want to go into the same avenue as we have with cow dairy. And in the cow dairy, the milk is taken apart in its different constituents, and then it's mixed together again to arrive at a certain fat content, or low fat or high fat or cream, whatever. And the value of camel milk is also it's wholesome. We don't want anybody to mess with the camel milk. We wanted to drink it as soon as possible as it comes from the camel, and we don't want anybody to to add water or to add fat or this or that. I think that would be very important, and I think actually a network of smaller farms or of nomads is a much more it brings out the social impact of camel milk. It can create income for a lot of people, whereas if we have a big corporation coming in with lots of money, then they need to make more money, and both the camel welfare and the producers may suffer. I mean, it's just my my personal take on this, as I'm from the League for Pastoral Peoples, and we support pastors around the world.
Well, Ilse, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. Just the ideal is what you're saying. I totally 1,000% agree. That's the ideal. So I do want to see that in this country too. And it is slowly starting to happen. A lot of these people that contact me are starting their own small camel dairies. I mean, I would like to have a larger dairy for some of the reasons that it could do to help promote, awareness and science, which some of our larger camel dairies do in the Middle East. But yes, some of their methods are very good. Like they don't like use antibiotics. They don't do all that stuff like cow farms do. Yeah. So the last thing I want is for anybody to treat a camel like a cow. I want them to be treated like they do, where they have great grazing areas. They're taken care of like they do in those good dairies in the Middle East. But yes, the low and slow on the land is the number one. We are totally in agreement.
Okay, great. Christina, can you answer a practical question? Have you ever heard of any case of a child having negative side effects from drinking camel milk, whether autistic or not autistic?
I have. This doesn't happen all the time. It's very, it doesn't happen regularly, but it does happen sometimes. So sometimes this is because they're not properly prepared already. If they're an autistic child, some of the foods that they're on may be conflicting, so they need to remove those. But all of the little side effects that you have with some, again, like I say, this really doesn't happen all the time, but all of those side effects are temporary and they're not that big of a deal. Like maybe they'll stay awake too late, at night, they'll be too activated if you give it too late, or, you've given a little bit too much or too little. So there is a guide in the back of Camel Crazy that tells you how to prepare, how much to give, what are the side effects, all those kind of things. So I know what parents want, and that's pretty much going to give them that. And of course, adults too, with other medical conditions. I do outline a lot of those in Camel Crazy, also with serving sizes, recommendations, things like that. So the side effects are nothing to be afraid of, because first of all, they don't happen for a lot of people. Second of all, they're all just minimal, temporary.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I think, so as you were saying, Camel Crazy is available in the internet practically everywhere. It's easy to obtain. Is it available as an ebook?
It is available as an ebook. So that's a good thing, because sometimes people, it's very hard in like Pakistan or other countries. Sometimes people, it's hard to get print books or mail. So they can get an ebook easy. And a lot of parents or people that want it for their own reading or health condition or whatever reason you want it, you get it on ebook, you can start right away. Because if you've got camel milk there sitting in your house, or you just want to buy it, get that ebook and you can go right away and learn what you need to know.
Okay, I think we're all set then. I think I can't thank you enough for giving this really comprehensive presentation. But I would also really like to thank the International Camel Organization for making this possible. I'd like to thank the technicians and the translators for doing a challenging job. And I also like to thank the King Abdulaziz Public Library for providing the technical facilities. So I think everybody must have taken down your contact details and the places where your book can be bought. And I look forward to you doing more work on this. It will benefit the camel breeders. And so I think we can sign off, and thank you so much. And good night, or whatever it is around the world. Here it's like past midnight. So yeah, thanks so much, everybody. Would you like to say a final word, Christina?
Thank you, Dr. Ilse. You did that quite eloquently, but I will just say shukran to my friends in Saudi and other places. Thank you to everyone. And it's really an honor to have you listen to this Camel Crazy journey of mine. And I appreciate your time. And I just am glad to be here. So thanks to the entire staff of ICO again, the library, Dr. Ilse, and all the people behind the scenes that have helped make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.